Listen carefully. Whether you realize it or not, your mind is being trained every single day. The only question is, who's doing the training? If you don't discipline your mind, distractions will. If you don't control your thoughts, excuses will. If you don't decide your future, comfort will decide it for you. Most people believe life happens to them. That's a lie. Life responds to the standards you train into your mind. And if you refuse to build discipline, life will build it through failure, regret, missed opportunities, and pain. This audiobook is about taking control before life is forced to do it for you. Because one way or another, your mind will be disciplined. The choice is whether you do it willingly, or whether life does it brutally. Chapter 1. Stop negotiating with yourself. There is a silent habit destroying more dreams than failure ever could. It is not lack of talent. It is not lack of intelligence. It is not lack of opportunity. It is the habit of negotiating with yourself. Every day, people make promises to themselves. They promise to wake up early. They promise to start exercising. They promise to finish the project. They promise to save money. They promise to finally become the person they know they can be. And then something happens. The alarm goes off. The workout feels difficult. The task feels uncomfortable. The bed feels warm. The couch feels inviting. And suddenly, the negotiation begins. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe later. Maybe just this once. But here's what most people fail to understand. Every time you say you'll do something and then don't, you weaken self-trust. Read that again in your mind. Every time you say you'll do something and then don't, you weaken self-trust. Most people think confidence comes from positive thinking. It doesn't. Confidence comes from evidence. Confidence comes from proving to yourself that your word means something. If you tell yourself you're going to do something and you consistently follow through, your mind begins to trust you. But if you constantly break promises to yourself, your mind learns a dangerous lesson. It learns that your words have no value. And once that happens, discipline becomes almost impossible. Because why would your mind believe you now? You have a choice. You can continue making promises and breaking them. Or you can start becoming a person whose actions match their words. That's the key. The relationship you have with yourself is built on trust. And trust is built through consistency. Not perfection. Consistency. A promise delayed becomes a promise broken. A promise delayed becomes a promise broken. A promise delayed becomes a promise broken. Those words may sound harsh, but they are true. Every delay teaches your brain something. Every excuse teaches your brain something. Every act of avoidance teaches your brain something. The question is, what are you teaching it? Successful people understand something that average people ignore. They do not negotiate with commitments after they make them. Once the decision is made, the conversation is over. The workout is happening. The work is getting done. The task is being completed. End of discussion. Most people think discipline means being strong. Not exactly. Discipline means eliminating unnecessary decisions. Because every time you reopen a decision, you create an opportunity for weakness. You have a choice. You can decide once. Or you can fight the same battle every day. And the second option is exhausting. Think about waking up early. The alarm rings at 6 o'clock. In that moment, there are two versions of you. The version that made the commitment, and the version that wants comfort. The disciplined person listens to the version that made the commitment. The undisciplined person listens to the version seeking comfort. That's the difference. Not intelligence, not talent, not luck. just obedience to a prior decision. The moment of decision determines the quality of your life. The moment of decision determines the quality of your life. The moment of decision determines the quality of your life. Not next week. Not next year. Not someday. Right now. Every major outcome in your life is built upon thousands of small decisions. A decision to wake up. A decision to train. A decision to study. A decision to keep going. A decision to finish. Most people underestimate small decisions because they focus on big results. But results are simply accumulated decisions. Nothing more. Nothing less. Consider exercise. Nobody becomes unhealthy overnight. Nobody becomes strong overnight. The outcome is built through repetition. One skipped workout doesn't seem important. One unhealthy meal doesn't seem important. One missed opportunity doesn't seem important. But life doesn't measure isolated events. Life measures patterns. And tiny negotiations create lifelong mediocrity. That's why so many people stay stuck. Not because they lack potential, because they constantly negotiate away their future. 5 more minutes becomes 10 years of regret. One skipped workout becomes declining health. One delayed dream becomes a lifetime of wondering what could have been. You have a choice. You can negotiate your future away, or you can protect it. Every decision is casting a vote. Every action is casting a vote. Every habit is casting a vote. The question is simple. What are you voting for? Now, let's go deeper, because discipline does not begin with action. It begins with ending internal debates. Most people lose before they even start. Not physically. Mentally, the battle happens in their mind. Should I do it? Should I wait? Should I start tomorrow? Should I skip today? Should I try later? By the time the debate ends, the opportunity is gone. The energy is gone. The momentum is gone. And the excuse wins. Discipline begins when internal debates end. Discipline begins when internal debates end. Discipline begins when internal debates end. The most powerful shift you can make is learning to act before emotions get a vote. Because emotions are unreliable. Sometimes you'll feel motivated. Sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll feel confident. Sometimes you'll feel uncertain. Sometimes you'll feel ready. Sometimes you'll feel afraid. If your actions depend on emotions, your results will always be inconsistent. That's the key. Feelings change. Standards don't. The highest performers in the world understand this. They don't ask themselves how they feel. They ask themselves what needs to be done. Then they do it. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need a better mood. You don't need motivation. You need action. Do first. Feel later. Do first. Feel later. Do first. Feel later. Most people have it backwards. They believe action follows motivation. In reality, motivation often follows action. You start. You move. You engage. Then the energy appears. Then the momentum arrives. Then confidence grows. Action creates momentum. Momentum creates belief. Belief creates transformation. But it all begins with action. That's why the rule is simple. Do first. Feel later. The disciplined mind understands that emotions are passengers, not drivers. Your feelings can come along for the ride, but they don't get to hold the steering wheel. You do. And that is what this entire audiobook is about. Taking control of the steering wheel. Training your mind before life is forced to train it for you. Because every day you negotiate with yourself, you become weaker. Every day you honor your commitments, you become stronger. Every day you delay, you reinforce weakness. Every day you act, You reinforce discipline. You have a choice. Always. A promise delayed becomes a promise broken. The moment of decision determines the quality of your life. Do first. Feel later. Master those 3 principles, and you begin building a mind that obeys your commands instead of your emotions. You stopped negotiating with yourself. Now it's time to confront the place where most negotiations begin. Your desire for comfort. Chapter 2. Your comfort zone is a slow prison. Most prisons don't have bars. Most prisons don't have locks. Most prisons don't have guards standing at the door. The most dangerous prison in the world is one people willingly walk into every day. It's called comfort. And unlike a traditional prison, this one feels good. That's what makes it dangerous. Comfort doesn't arrive looking like an enemy. It arrives looking like a reward. It whispers instead of shouts. It promises safety. It promises relief. It promises convenience. And little by little, it convinces you to stop growing. That's how potential dies. Not through catastrophe. Not through failure. Not through some dramatic collapse. Potential dies through comfort. One comfortable choice at a time. Most people think their biggest obstacle is difficulty. It's not. Their biggest obstacle is convenience. Because difficulty forces growth. Comfort prevents it. Think about it. The body grows through resistance. The mind grows through challenge. Character grows through adversity. Yet most people spend their entire lives trying to eliminate every form of discomfort. And then they wonder why they stay the same. Comfort feels safe, but quietly steals potential. That's the truth. It doesn't steal your future all at once. It steals it gradually, so gradually that you barely notice. 1 extra hour of sleep, 1 missed workout, 1 delayed project, 1 excuse, 1 distraction, 1 more day, then another, then another. Years pass. The life you wanted never arrives. Not because you weren't capable, because comfort kept convincing you to wait. Comfort costs more than effort. Comfort costs more than effort. Comfort costs more than effort. Most people never calculate the true price of comfort. They see the effort required to change, but they don't see the cost of staying the same. They see the pain of discipline, but they ignore the pain of regret. They see the discomfort of growth, but they overlook the suffering of stagnation. And that's why they stay trapped. Because they are measuring the wrong cost. Let's be honest. Getting up early is uncomfortable. Working out is uncomfortable. Learning new skills is uncomfortable. Having difficult conversations is uncomfortable. Building a business is uncomfortable. Changing your life is uncomfortable. But do you know what's even more uncomfortable? Looking back 10 years from now and realizing you never became who you could have been. That's a pain that never leaves. You have a choice: temporary discomfort, or permanent regret, temporary effort, or permanent limitation. That's the choice. Most people choose immediate relief over long-term growth, not because they're weak, because they're untrained. Human beings naturally seek comfort. That's normal. But discipline means refusing to let comfort make your decisions. That's the key. Comfort is not the enemy. Allowing comfort to control your life is. Now let's talk about one of the biggest traps comfort creates. It convinces people to stay where they no longer belong. Look around. How many people stay in jobs they hate? Not because they love the work, not because they're fulfilled, but because leaving feels uncertain. The paycheck is familiar. The routine is familiar. The environment is familiar. So they stay, year after year, complaining, dreaming, wishing, but never moving. Not because they can't, because comfort has disguised itself as security. The same thing happens in relationships. People stay in relationships that drain them. Relationships without growth. Relationships without respect. Relationships without joy. Why? Because leaving feels uncomfortable. Starting over feels uncomfortable. Facing uncertainty feels uncomfortable. So they settle. They trade possibility for familiarity, and they call it stability. But stability without growth is just stagnation. What's familiar isn't always what's right. What's familiar isn't always what's right. What's familiar isn't always what's right. Never forget that. Just because something is familiar doesn't mean it's serving you. Just because you've done something for years doesn't mean you should continue. Just because everyone around you accepts it doesn't mean you should. Familiarity creates attachment. Attachment creates resistance. Resistance prevents growth. And suddenly, people spend decades protecting routines that are slowly destroying their potential. The same thing happens with habits. People repeat the same patterns every day. Wake up, scroll, complain, avoid, delay, repeat, not because they enjoy it, because it's familiar. And familiarity creates a false sense of safety. But life doesn't reward familiarity. Life rewards growth. Life rewards courage. Life rewards action. You have a choice. You can protect your comfort, or you can protect your future. You cannot do both. At some point, one must be sacrificed. And the people who build extraordinary lives understand exactly what must go. Comfort. Because comfort is often nothing more than fear wearing a disguise. Fear of failure. Fear of rejection. Fear of uncertainty. Fear of change. But here's what most people never realize. The fear doesn't disappear before you act. It disappears because you act. That's why growth begins where comfort ends. Growth begins where comfort ends. Growth begins where comfort ends. Every major breakthrough in your life exists outside your current comfort zone. Every skill, every achievement, every transformation, every opportunity, every new version of yourself lives on the other side of discomfort, not inside it, outside it. The problem is that people wait until they feel ready. But readiness is a myth. You become ready by moving. You become confident by acting. You become strong by struggling. Not before, after. That's the key. Growth is earned through exposure. You expose yourself to challenge. You expose yourself to uncertainty. You expose yourself to resistance. And eventually, your comfort zone expands. The things that once intimidated you become normal. The things that once felt difficult become easy. The things that once seemed impossible become routine. But none of that happens if you stay comfortable. That's why you must intentionally practice discomfort. Every single day. Not extreme discomfort. Controlled discomfort. Strategic discomfort. Purposeful discomfort. Take the cold shower. Wake up earlier. Do the difficult task first. Have the hard conversation. Speak up when you're nervous. Learn the skill that intimidates you. Take the opportunity that scares you. Challenge yourself daily. Train yourself to be uncomfortable. Train yourself to be uncomfortable. Train yourself to be uncomfortable. Because discomfort is not punishment. Discomfort is preparation. Life will challenge you whether you prepare or not. Life will test you whether you volunteer or not. Life will demand strength whether you build it or not. So why not build it now? Why not prepare yourself intentionally? Why not become stronger by choice instead of by force? You have a choice. You always have a choice. Stay comfortable and slowly shrink your potential, Or embrace discomfort and expand your future. One path feels easier today. The other creates a better tomorrow. Remember this: comfort costs more than effort. What's familiar isn't always what's right. Train yourself to be uncomfortable. Because if you don't challenge yourself, life eventually will. And life's challenges are always harder than the ones you choose for yourself. You escaped the prison of comfort. Now it's time to face the force that constantly pulls you back into it. The force stealing your attention, your energy, and your future. Chapter 3. Distraction is the enemy's favorite weapon. Most people believe their biggest enemy is failure. They're wrong. Others think it's lack of opportunity. They're wrong too. Some blame bad luck. Some blame circumstances. Some blame other people. But in reality, one enemy quietly destroys more dreams than almost anything else. Distraction. Not because distraction looks dangerous, because it doesn't. That's what makes it effective. Distraction doesn't kick down the front door. It slips through the cracks. It arrives as a notification, a quick message, a short video, a harmless scroll, a 5-minute break. And before you know it, the day is gone. The opportunity is gone. The momentum is gone. The focus is gone. And the worst part? Most people don't even realize what happened, because distraction feels harmless in the moment. But its damage is measured over years. That's the danger. The greatest theft in modern life is not the theft of money. It's the theft of attention. Attention is the most valuable asset in modern life. Not time. Attention. Because where your attention goes determines how your time gets used. And how your time gets used determines the quality of your life. Think about that. Two people can have the exact same 24 hours. One builds a business. One learns a skill. One transforms their body. One creates a better future. The other scrolls, consumes, wanders, reacts, and remains exactly where they are. The difference is not time. The difference is attention. Where attention goes, life follows. Where attention goes, life follows. Where attention goes, life follows. Your attention is your future in its rawest form. Every moment of focused attention is an investment. Every moment of distracted attention is an expense. And most people are spending their future without realizing it. You have a choice. You can direct your attention, or you can allow someone else to direct it for you. Because make no mistake, there are entire industries competing for your attention. Entire companies built around keeping you distracted. Entire algorithms designed to capture your focus and hold it for as long as possible. Why? Because attention is power. And whoever controls your attention influences your behavior. That's the key. Control your attention, and you control your life. Lose control of your attention, and life begins controlling you. Every distraction steals pieces of a future goal. Every single one. One distraction seems insignificant. One interruption seems harmless. One delay seems minor. But success and failure are rarely created by single moments. They are created by accumulation. A distracted day becomes a distracted week. A distracted week becomes a distracted month. A distracted month becomes a distracted year, and eventually a distracted life. Now let's talk about the biggest distractions of our time. Social media. Endless scrolling. Constant notifications. Digital noise. Most people wake up and immediately surrender control of their attention. Before their feet touch the floor, they're already consuming. Checking messages. Checking notifications. Checking feeds. Checking what everyone else is doing. And from that moment forward, their attention belongs to someone else. They become reactive instead of intentional. Reactive people rarely build extraordinary lives because greatness requires concentration, not constant interruption. Imagine trying to read a book while someone taps you on the shoulder every 30 seconds. Imagine trying to build a house while constantly walking away from the construction site. Imagine trying to run a marathon while stopping every few minutes. That's what distraction does to your goals. It destroys momentum. And momentum is everything. The problem isn't that social media exists. The problem is that most people consume it without discipline. Hours disappear. Days disappear. Months disappear. And they tell themselves they were busy. But busy and productive are not the same thing. That's a lesson many people never learn. Being occupied is not the same as making progress. Being entertained is not the same as being fulfilled. Being informed is not the same as being transformed. You have a choice. Consume your future. Or build it. Small distractions create big regrets. Small distractions create big regrets. Small distractions create big regrets. The reason distraction is so dangerous is because its consequences are delayed. You don't feel the damage immediately. You don't scroll for 30 minutes and suddenly lose your dream. You don't waste one afternoon and suddenly fail. The consequences accumulate silently, like water dripping on stone, day after day, week after week, year after year. Until one day you look around and wonder where the time went. You wonder why someone else achieved what you only talked about. You wonder why your goals still feel distant. And often the answer is simple. Too many distractions, not enough focus. Think about the compound effect. People understand compound interest with money, but they rarely understand compound attention. 1 hour of focused effort every day seems small, until you multiply it across years. 1 hour becomes hundreds, then thousands, then mastery. The same principle works in reverse. 1 hour lost every day seems harmless, until years pass. Then the cost becomes enormous. Small distractions create big regrets. Never forget that. The future is built through daily attention, not occasional effort. Now let's discuss how to fight back. Because awareness alone isn't enough. You must become a guardian of your focus. You must learn to defend your mind. Most people protect their money better than they protect their attention. They lock their doors, protect their bank accounts, secure their valuables, yet they allow unlimited access to their minds, unlimited interruptions, unlimited noise, unlimited distraction. And then they wonder why they can't focus. Focus is not found. Focus is protected. That's the key. You must become aggressive about guarding your attention. Not passive. Aggressive. That means controlling your environment. Turn off unnecessary notifications. Create dedicated work periods. Remove distractions before they become problems. Design your environment for success. Because environment often beats willpower. A person surrounded by distractions must fight constantly. A person who removes distractions gains an advantage immediately. The goal is not to be stronger than temptation. The goal is to make temptation less available. That's intelligent discipline. Create focus zones. Create technology boundaries. Create periods of uninterrupted work. Create moments of silence. Because attention grows in silence, not noise. You also need to become aware of attention leaks, small moments that seem harmless. Checking your phone repeatedly, switching tasks constantly, watching one more video, opening one more tab. Each one weakens concentration. Each one trains the brain to seek novelty instead of mastery. And mastery requires depth, not constant stimulation. You have a choice: depth or distraction, mastery or mediocrity, focus or fragmentation. Protect your mind like a fortress. Protect your mind like a fortress. Protect your mind like a fortress. A fortress does not allow every visitor inside. A fortress has walls, standards, boundaries, rules. Your mind needs the same protection. Not every notification deserves your attention. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every trend deserves your attention. Not every piece of information deserves your attention. Attention is expensive. Spend it wisely. Because wherever attention goes, life follows. And if you continuously give your attention to distraction, distraction becomes your life. But if you give your attention to growth, growth becomes your life. If you give your attention to excellence, excellence becomes your life. If you give your attention to discipline, discipline becomes your life. Remember these principles. Where attention goes, life follows. Small distractions create big regrets. Protect your mind like a fortress. Master these ideas, and you gain control over one of the most powerful forces shaping your future. Because a disciplined life requires more than focus. It requires something even deeper: the willingness to stop lying to yourself. And that's exactly where we're going next. Chapter 4. Excuses are self-deception. There is one habit that quietly destroys more potential than failure. One habit that keeps people stuck for years. One habit that feels harmless, but slowly poisons ambition. Excuses. Not because excuses are always false. Many excuses contain some truth. That's what makes them dangerous. The most destructive lies are not the obvious ones. They're the believable ones. They're the lies wrapped in logic. The lies wrapped in reason. The lies wrapped in justification. And excuses are masters of disguise. They sound intelligent. They sound reasonable. They sound convincing. But regardless of how good they sound, they almost always produce the same outcome: stagnation. No growth, no progress, no transformation, just delay. Excuses don't stop you immediately. They stop you gradually. One postponed action at a time, one justification at a time, one rationalization at a time, until years pass and nothing changes. That's why excuses are so dangerous. They allow you to feel comfortable while remaining stuck. They remove urgency. They remove responsibility. They remove accountability. And once accountability disappears, progress usually disappears with it. Reasons don't create results. Reasons don't create results. Reasons don't create results. Never forget that. The world is full of people with reasons. Very few people have results. Everyone has explanations. Everyone has obstacles. Everyone has difficulties. Everyone has limitations. The difference is not who has problems. The difference is who acts anyway. You have a choice. You can collect reasons, or you can create results, but you cannot do both at the same level. One of the hardest truths you'll ever accept is this: people lie to themselves before they lie to others. Most self-deception doesn't happen intentionally. People genuinely believe their excuses. They repeat them so often that they begin to sound like facts. I'll start when things calm down. I'll start when I have more confidence. I'll start when I have more money. I'll start when I have more time. The problem is not the statement. The problem is the assumption. The assumption that some future version of life will suddenly become easier. It rarely does. Life remains challenging. Responsibilities continue. Problems continue. Obstacles continue. The difference is that disciplined people stop waiting for ideal circumstances. They act despite imperfect circumstances. That's the key. Success doesn't belong to people with fewer obstacles. Success belongs to people who move through obstacles. Now let's expose some of the most common excuses. The first one is lack of time. This excuse is everywhere. People say they don't have time to exercise. They don't have time to learn. They don't have time to improve. They don't have time to pursue their goals. But let's be honest, most people don't actually have a time problem. They have a priority problem. Because everyone gets 24 hours. The difference lies in how those hours are spent. Hours disappear into entertainment. Hours disappear into scrolling. Hours disappear into distractions. Hours disappear into activities producing no meaningful return. Then people claim they had no time. The truth hurts sometimes, but growth requires honesty. The issue isn't always time. The issue is allocation. You have a choice. Spend your hours intentionally, or allow them to disappear. The second excuse is lack of motivation. This one sounds convincing. After all, motivation feels important. But motivation is unreliable. Some mornings you'll have it. Some mornings you won't. If your actions depend on motivation, your progress will always be inconsistent. Successful people understand something important. They don't wait to feel motivated. They move first. They act first. They show up first. Then motivation often follows. Not the other way around. Discipline works when motivation disappears. That's why discipline matters. Anyone can work when they feel inspired. Few people can work when they don't. And that's where separation happens. That's where growth happens. That's where transformation begins. The conditions will never be perfect. The conditions will never be perfect. The conditions will never be perfect. The third excuse is lack of resources. People say they need more money, more tools, more equipment, more support, more opportunities. And while resources can help, they are rarely the deciding factor. History is filled with people who started with almost nothing. Limited money, limited connections, limited advantages. Yet they found a way. Why? Because resourcefulness matters more than resources. People who are committed find solutions. People who are merely interested find excuses. That's the difference. One asks, "How can I?" The other asks, "Why can't I?" The fourth excuse is lack of confidence. Many people believe confidence comes before action. But confidence usually comes from action. You become confident by doing difficult things, not by thinking about them, not by preparing forever, not by waiting, by doing. Every action builds evidence. Every challenge overcome builds belief. Every promise kept builds confidence. The person you admire today was once uncertain too. The difference is they moved anyway. They acted anyway. They continued anyway. The conditions will never be perfect. And waiting for perfect conditions is often just fear in disguise. Fear pretending to be preparation. Fear pretending to be logic. Fear pretending to be wisdom. But fear never disappears through waiting. It disappears through action. That's the key. Action dissolves uncertainty. Action creates clarity. Action creates momentum. Action creates confidence. Now let's discuss the most important principle in this entire chapter. Radical ownership. This idea has the power to completely change your life. Most people spend years looking outward, blaming circumstances, blaming childhood, blaming the economy, blaming society, blaming bad luck, blaming other people. And while some of those factors may be real, blaming them changes nothing. Blame gives away power. Ownership creates power. Ownership says, "This is my responsibility. This is my problem. This is my life. This is my future. And because it's mine, I can do something about it." That's empowering. Responsibility is not punishment. Responsibility is freedom. Because the moment you accept responsibility, you gain the ability to influence outcomes. You stop being a victim of circumstances. You become a creator of circumstances. That's a completely different way of living. Own it all. Own it all. Own it all. Own your habits. Own your decisions. Own your mistakes. Own your delays. Own your progress. Own your failures. Own your future. Not because everything is your fault, but because ownership gives you control. And control creates change. The most disciplined people in the world share this mindset. When something goes wrong, they ask, "What can I do differently? What can I improve? What can I learn?" They don't waste energy looking for someone to blame. They look for the lesson. Because lessons create growth. Blame creates stagnation. You have a choice: excuses or ownership. Victimhood or responsibility. Delay or action. Growth or stagnation. The decision belongs to you. Remember these principles. Reasons don't create results. The conditions will never be perfect. Own it all. Master these ideas and you remove one of the biggest obstacles standing between you and the life you want. Because the moment excuses disappear, something powerful happens. You begin to realize that your mind can be trained. Your habits can be trained. Your behavior can be trained. And that's exactly where we're going next. Chapter 5. Train your mind to obey commands. There is a question you need to ask yourself. Who is in charge? You or your moods? Because whether you realize it or not, one of them is making your decisions every single day. And for most people, the answer is uncomfortable. Their moods are in control. They wake up and ask themselves how they feel. If they feel motivated, they work. If they feel inspired, they exercise. If they feel confident, they take action. If they don't feel those things, they wait. They delay. They postpone. They promise to start tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And next month becomes another year of unrealized potential. The problem is not your moods. The problem is allowing your moods to become your leader. Moods are temporary. Moods are unpredictable. Moods are unstable. Sometimes you'll feel energized. Sometimes you'll feel exhausted. Sometimes you'll feel focused. Sometimes you'll feel distracted. Sometimes you'll feel courageous. Sometimes you'll feel afraid. If your life is controlled by changing emotions, your results will constantly change too. That's why discipline exists. Discipline is not about eliminating emotions. Discipline is about refusing to let emotions make important decisions. That's the key. Most people obey moods. Disciplined people train moods to obey standards. Read that again. Most people obey moods. Disciplined people train moods to obey standards. Standards over feelings. Standards over feelings. Standards over feelings. A standard is a decision you've already made. A standard says, I exercise regardless of how I feel. I keep my promises regardless of how I feel. I do the work regardless of how I feel. I show up regardless of how I feel. That's power, because when standards become stronger than feelings, consistency becomes possible. And consistency changes everything. Think about brushing your teeth. Most people don't wake up and negotiate whether they should brush their teeth. They simply do it. Not because they're motivated, because it's become a standard. Imagine if your workouts became that automatic. Imagine if your learning became that automatic. Imagine if your discipline became that automatic. That's the goal. not motivation. Automation, not emotional excitement. Behavioral consistency. The strongest people are not the people who always feel ready. The strongest people are the people who act when they don't. You have a choice. You can obey your emotions, or you can lead them. One creates comfort. The other creates growth. Now let's talk about how this transformation actually happens, because discipline is not something you're born with. It's something you train. Every disciplined person started somewhere. Every disciplined person was once inconsistent. Every disciplined person once struggled with excuses, distractions, and procrastination. The difference is that they understood something most people never learn. The mind is trainable. Your habits are trainable. Your behavior is trainable. Your identity is trainable. You're not fixed. You're conditioned. And conditioning happens through repetition. What you repeat, you become. What you repeat, you become. What you repeat, you become. This principle governs your entire life. Every repeated thought becomes stronger. Every repeated action becomes easier. Every repeated habit becomes more automatic. The brain adapts to whatever you repeatedly ask it to do. That's why repetition is so powerful, and it's also why bad habits become so dangerous. Because repetition doesn't care whether the behavior is helping you or hurting you. It simply strengthens whatever you practice. Practice distraction. You become distracted. Practice procrastination. You become a procrastinator. Practice discipline. You become disciplined. The brain follows repetition. That's the key. Most people focus on outcomes. Disciplined people focus on repetitions, because outcomes are delayed. Repetitions happen today. Think about going to the gym. Nobody becomes strong from one workout. Nobody transforms their body in a single day. Strength is built through repeated stress and repeated recovery. The same thing applies to discipline. Discipline is a muscle. And every time you keep a promise to yourself, that muscle gets stronger. Every time you resist distraction, it gets stronger. Every time you act despite discomfort, it gets stronger. Every time you choose standards over feelings, it gets stronger. At first, it feels difficult. That's normal. A weak muscle struggles under pressure, but with repetition, what once felt difficult becomes natural. That's how transformation happens, not through dramatic breakthroughs, through repeated behavior, day after day, week after week, month after month. What you repeat, you become. Never forget that, because whether you're aware of it or not, you're already conditioning yourself every day. The question is, what are you conditioning yourself to become? Now let's make this practical, because knowledge without action changes nothing. You need daily non-negotiables. Actions that happen regardless of circumstances. Actions that happen regardless of mood. Actions that happen regardless of convenience. Most people fail because everything is optional. They negotiate everything. They debate everything. They delay everything. Disciplined people eliminate unnecessary decisions. They create non-negotiables. For one person, it might be 30 minutes of exercise. For another, it might be reading 10 pages. For another, it might be 1 hour of focused work. The specific action matters less than the principle. The principle is simple. You do it no matter what. That's where self-respect comes from. That's where confidence comes from. That's where discipline comes from. Not intensity, consistency. Most people overestimate what they can do in one day and underestimate what they can do in 1 year. They chase extreme effort, then burn out, then quit, then start over, then repeat the cycle. Disciplined people think differently. They focus on sustainability. They focus on consistency. They focus on showing up. Because consistency beats intensity. Every single time. A person who exercises moderately for 5 years will outperform the person who trains intensely for 2 weeks and quits. A person who reads 10 pages every day will outperform the person waiting for the perfect study session. A person who saves a little consistently will outperform the person waiting for the perfect financial situation. The secret is not intensity. The secret is repetition. And repetition requires consistency. That's why your goal is simple. Win today. Win today. Win today. Not next year. Not next month. Today. People become overwhelmed because they're trying to conquer their entire future. But the future is built one day at a time. You don't need to win the next decade. You need to win today. Keep today's promise. Complete today's task. Honor today's commitment. Take today's step. That's it. Tomorrow can wait. Focus on today. Because if you keep winning today, eventually you win the week, then the month, then the year, then your life. You have a choice. Make today count, or let today disappear. Build momentum, or reinforce old patterns. Strengthen discipline, or strengthen excuses. The decision is always yours. Remember these principles: standards over feelings. What you repeat, you become. Win today. Master these 3 ideas, and you begin transforming discipline from an occasional act into a permanent identity. Because once your mind learns to obey your commands, something extraordinary happens. You stop fearing difficulty. You stop running from discomfort. You stop seeing pain as the enemy. And that's exactly what we need to discuss next, because growth always demands a price, and that price is pain. Chapter 6. Pain is the tuition of growth. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid pain. They avoid difficult conversations. They avoid hard work. They avoid rejection. They avoid failure. They avoid discomfort. They avoid struggle. And in doing so, they unknowingly avoid growth. Because growth and discomfort have always traveled together. They always have. And they always will. The problem is that most people have been taught to see pain as a signal to stop, a signal to retreat, a signal to quit. But what if pain isn't always the enemy? What if pain is often the teacher? What if pain is the price of becoming someone greater? Because the truth is simple. Every meaningful transformation requires discomfort. Every single one. No exceptions. The stronger body requires physical discomfort. The stronger mind requires mental discomfort. The stronger character requires emotional discomfort. Every level of growth demands a level of pain. That's the reality. Not because life is unfair, but because transformation requires resistance. And resistance is uncomfortable. There is no growth without resistance. There is no growth without resistance. There is no growth without resistance. Think about nature. A seed must break apart before it can become a tree. A caterpillar must dissolve before it becomes a butterfly. Steel must endure intense heat before it becomes stronger. The same principle applies to you. You cannot become stronger while remaining unchanged. You cannot become better while remaining comfortable. You cannot become more capable while avoiding challenge. Growth requires pressure. Growth requires resistance. Growth requires discomfort. That's the key. The pain is not proof that something is wrong. Often, the pain is proof that something is changing. Yet many people quit too early. They experience discomfort and immediately assume they're on the wrong path. They encounter difficulty and assume they're failing. They feel resistance and assume they're incapable. But resistance is not evidence of failure. Resistance is evidence of effort. And effort is required for growth. You have a choice. Run from discomfort. Or learn from it. avoid resistance, or use it to become stronger. One path creates temporary relief. The other creates lasting transformation. Pain is part of the process. Pain is part of the process. Pain is part of the process. Never forget that. Now let's make this practical. Let's look at fitness. Imagine someone entering a gym for the first time. Everything feels difficult. Their muscles burn. Their body aches. Their energy drops. The experience is uncomfortable. Many people quit right there. They interpret discomfort as a warning sign. But the disciplined person sees it differently. They understand the soreness is temporary. They understand the discomfort has a purpose. They understand the pain is producing adaptation. So they continue. And eventually, what once felt impossible becomes normal. The body adapts. The strength grows. The confidence increases. The same principle exists in business. Every entrepreneur experiences discomfort, uncertainty, risk, failure, rejection, stress. No one builds something meaningful without experiencing those things. The successful entrepreneur isn't the person who avoids pain. It's the person who learns how to move through it. The person who keeps showing up despite setbacks. The person who keeps learning despite mistakes. The person who keeps building despite uncertainty. Pain is part of the process. The same applies to personal development. Learning new skills is uncomfortable. Changing habits is uncomfortable. Breaking old patterns is uncomfortable. Facing your weaknesses is uncomfortable. Growth demands that you confront things you'd rather avoid. And that's exactly why most people never change. They want the reward, but they resist the process. They want the outcome, but they avoid the discomfort required to earn it. And life doesn't work that way. The process cannot be skipped. Now here's one of the most important lessons you'll ever learn. Pain is unavoidable, but the type of pain you experience is often your choice. Choose your pain. Choose your pain. Choose your pain. Most people assume they're choosing comfort, but they're not. They're simply postponing pain. When you avoid exercise, you're choosing the pain of declining health. When you avoid difficult conversations, you're choosing the pain of unresolved problems. When you avoid discipline, you're choosing the pain of regret. When you avoid responsibility, you're choosing the pain of limitation. The pain doesn't disappear. It simply changes form. That's the key. Life always presents two types of pain. The pain of discipline, or the pain of regret. The pain of growth, or the pain of stagnation. The pain of effort, or the pain of missed potential. And one of those pains lasts much longer than the other. Temporary pain teaches. Permanent regret haunts. Think about the person who never pursues their dream. For years they remain comfortable, safe, protected. But eventually they begin asking questions. What if I had tried? What if I had started? What if I had believed in myself? What if I had taken the risk? Those questions become heavy, because regret grows over time. The pain of discipline fades. The pain of regret expands. You have a choice. Suffer now and grow, or avoid discomfort now and suffer later. That's a difficult truth, but it's a liberating one, because once you understand it, discomfort loses much of its power over you. You stop fearing temporary pain, because you understand its purpose. Now let's talk about emotional resilience, because physical pain is only one part of the journey. Mental and emotional pain often create the greatest challenges. Everyone experiences adversity. Everyone experiences setbacks. Everyone experiences disappointment. Everyone experiences loss. No one is exempt. The difference is not who experiences adversity. The difference is how they respond to it. Some people allow adversity to break them. Others allow adversity to build them. That's the choice. And that choice determines everything. Emotional resilience is the ability to remain steady when life becomes difficult, not because you enjoy hardship, but because you understand hardship has something to teach. Resilient people don't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" They ask, "What is this teaching me? What can I learn from this? How can this make me stronger?" That shift changes everything, because adversity becomes valuable when it creates growth. Every challenge contains a lesson. Every setback contains information. Every struggle contains an opportunity, but only if you're willing to face it. Only if you're willing to learn from it. Only if you're willing to stay in the fight. Lean into the struggle. Lean into the struggle. Lean into the struggle. Most people spend enormous energy resisting reality, resisting difficulty, resisting challenges, resisting discomfort. But resistance to reality only creates additional suffering. The stronger approach is acceptance. Accept the challenge. Accept the discomfort. Accept the difficulty. Then move forward anyway. That is resilience. That is strength. That is discipline. When adversity arrives, don't immediately search for an escape. Search for the lesson. When life becomes difficult, don't immediately ask how to avoid it. Ask how to grow through it. When discomfort appears, don't automatically retreat. Move toward it, because growth lives there. Strength lives there. Transformation lives there. You have a choice. Every challenge can weaken you, or strengthen you. Every setback can discourage you, or educate you. Every struggle can become an excuse, or a stepping stone. The decision is always yours. Remember these principles. Pain is part of the process. Choose your pain. Lean into the struggle. Master these lessons, and you stop seeing discomfort as a threat. You begin seeing it as evidence that you're moving forward, evidence that you're growing, evidence that you're becoming stronger. And once you stop running from pain, something remarkable happens. You begin building a new identity. An identity capable of handling challenges. An identity capable of honoring commitments. An identity capable of creating extraordinary results. And that's exactly where we're going next. Chapter 7. Build an identity that can't be shaken. Most people focus on changing their actions. Few people focus on changing their identity. And that's why so many people struggle to create lasting transformation. They try to force new behaviors onto an old self-image. They try to build discipline while still seeing themselves as undisciplined. They try to become confident while still identifying as insecure. They try to become successful while secretly believing they are destined to fail. And eventually, the old identity wins. Because behavior always follows belief. Actions follow identity. Actions follow identity. Actions follow identity. Never underestimate the power of that truth. Your life is constantly moving toward the person you believe yourself to be. If you believe you're lazy, your behavior will eventually support that belief. If you believe you're weak, your behavior will eventually support that belief. If you believe you're incapable, your behavior will eventually support that belief. Not because those things are true, but because identity influences behavior. That's the key. Most people are not limited by reality. They're limited by the story they've accepted about themselves. And once a story becomes an identity, it becomes incredibly powerful. Think about it. Imagine two people facing the exact same challenge. The first person says, "I'm not disciplined." The second person says, "I am becoming disciplined." Those statements may sound similar, but they produce completely different outcomes. The first identity creates excuses. The second identity creates effort. The first identity creates avoidance. The second identity creates persistence. Because identity shapes expectation, and expectation shapes behavior. People rise or fall to the level of who they believe they are. That's why changing your life requires more than changing your habits. It requires changing your self-image. The person in the mirror matters, not the physical reflection, the mental reflection, the identity you carry every day, the story you tell yourself when nobody is listening. You have a choice. Continue repeating old labels, or create a new identity. One keeps you trapped, the other sets you free. Identity drives behavior. Identity drives behavior. Identity drives behavior. Most people spend years trying to change outcomes, but outcomes are often symptoms. The real issue lies deeper. The real issue is identity. Now let's talk about labels, because labels are far more powerful than most people realize. Every label you repeatedly attach to yourself becomes a command your mind attempts to obey. When someone constantly says, "I'm bad with money," their behavior often reflects that belief. When someone constantly says, "I'm not confident," their behavior often reflects that belief. When someone constantly says, "I'm always procrastinating," their behavior often reflects that belief. The label becomes a prediction. The prediction becomes a behavior. The behavior becomes evidence, and the cycle continues. This is how self-fulfilling prophecies are created. The identity creates the action. Then the action reinforces the identity, over and over again, for years, sometimes for decades. That's why you must become extremely careful about the labels you accept, because many people are carrying identities that no longer serve them. Identities formed years ago, sometimes in childhood, sometimes after failure, sometimes after rejection, sometimes after disappointment. At one point, they experienced a setback, and instead of saying, "I failed," they began saying, "I am a failure." That's dangerous, because failure is an event. It is not an identity. The same applies to mistakes. The same applies to weaknesses. The same applies to struggles. An experience should never become a permanent label. Yet millions of people allow exactly that to happen. You have a choice. You can continue carrying outdated labels, or you can replace them. That's where transformation begins. Become the person first. Become the person first. Become the person first. Most people have the process backwards. They believe achievement creates identity. In reality, identity often creates achievement. They say, "When I become successful, I'll believe in myself. When I become fit, I'll see myself as healthy. When I become disciplined, I'll identify as disciplined." But lasting transformation works differently. You begin by adopting the identity. Then your actions start aligning with it. Then the results appear. A disciplined person asks, "What would a disciplined person do right now?" A confident person asks, "What would a confident person do right now?" A leader asks, "What would a leader do right now?" Identity becomes a compass, and behavior follows. That's the key. The goal is not pretending. The goal is becoming. Not through fantasy, not through wishful thinking, through repeated action aligned with a stronger identity. Now let's make this practical, because identity is not built through affirmations alone. Identity is built through evidence. Every promise you keep becomes evidence. Every difficult task you complete becomes evidence. Every act of discipline becomes evidence. Every challenge you face becomes evidence. Your brain is constantly collecting proof. Proof of who you are. Proof of what you're capable of. Proof of what standards you live by. And over time, those pieces of evidence build an identity. That's why small actions matter. They are identity votes. Every action casts a vote for the type of person you're becoming. Every workout casts a vote. Every focused work session casts a vote. Every act of courage casts a vote. Every decision matters, not because one decision changes everything, but because repeated decisions create identity. Identity drives behavior. Never forget that. Now let's talk about identity-based habits. This is where real transformation happens. Most people focus on outcomes: lose 20 pounds, make more money, read more books, build a business. Those goals are fine, but goals alone are not enough. Because goals focus on what you want. Identity focuses on who you're becoming, and who you're becoming is far more important. The goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. The goal is not to write a book. The goal is to become a writer. The goal is not to exercise occasionally. The goal is to become someone who trains consistently. That's a completely different mindset. Identity-based habits focus on being, not merely doing. You stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming?" That question changes everything, because once an identity becomes strong enough, discipline becomes easier. The disciplined person doesn't constantly debate whether to do the work. The work aligns with who they are. The healthy person doesn't constantly debate every healthy choice. Health aligns with who they are. The focused person doesn't constantly negotiate with distractions. Focus aligns with who they are. This is who I am. This is who I am. This is who I am. Those words are powerful because eventually discipline stops feeling like effort. It starts feeling like integrity. You're no longer forcing yourself to act. You're simply behaving consistently with your identity. And that creates freedom. No endless internal debates, no constant negotiations, no emotional bargaining, just alignment, just consistency, just action. You have a choice. Continue identifying with your limitations, or begin identifying with your potential. Continue repeating old stories, or create a stronger one. Continue reinforcing weakness, or start building strength. The decision is yours. Remember these principles. Identity drives behavior. Become the person first. This is who I am. Master these ideas and you stop chasing discipline as a temporary behavior. You begin building discipline as a permanent identity. And once your identity changes, consistency becomes possible. Not for a day, not for a week, for a lifetime. Because the strongest transformations are not built through intensity. They're built through consistency. And that's exactly what we need to talk about next. Chapter 8. Consistency beats intensity every time. One of the biggest lies people believe is that success comes from dramatic action. They think transformation happens in a breakthrough moment, a single decision, a single opportunity, a single burst of motivation. And because of that belief, they spend years waiting to feel inspired, waiting for the perfect plan, waiting for the perfect moment, waiting for a surge of motivation that will magically change everything. But real transformation rarely works that way. Success is usually much quieter, much less dramatic, much less exciting, and far more powerful. Because success is not built through intensity, it's built through consistency. The problem with intensity is that it's temporary. The problem with motivation is that it comes and goes. Some days you'll feel unstoppable. Other days you'll feel exhausted. Some mornings you'll wake up ready to conquer the world. Other mornings you'll question everything. If your progress depends on motivation, your progress will always be unstable. That's why so many people start strong and finish weak. They rely on emotion instead of discipline. They rely on excitement instead of consistency. And eventually, the excitement fades. That's when the excuses return. That's when the old habits return. That's when progress stops. Motivation creates bursts. Discipline creates momentum. Motivation creates bursts. Discipline creates momentum. Motivation creates bursts. Discipline creates momentum. That's the key. Bursts create activity. Momentum creates results. Anyone can have a productive day. Anyone can have a productive week. The real challenge is producing results year after year. That's where discipline separates itself from motivation. Because discipline doesn't ask how you feel. Discipline asks what needs to be done. Then it gets to work. You have a choice. You can chase motivation, or you can build momentum. One depends on emotions. The other depends on standards. And standards are far more reliable. Think about how most people approach change. They become inspired. They decide to transform their life overnight. They create impossible schedules, extreme diets, massive goals, unrealistic expectations. Then reality arrives. The plan becomes difficult. The excitement disappears. The effort feels heavy. And they quit. Not because they lacked potential, because they lacked consistency. Consistency wins. Consistency wins. Consistency wins. Always remember that. The person who shows up repeatedly will eventually outperform the person who occasionally shows up with intensity. Not because they're more talented, because they're more consistent. And consistency compounds. Now let's look at some examples. Consider elite athletes. Most people see the championship. They see the trophy. They see the victory. They see the moment of glory. What they don't see are the thousands of ordinary days, the early mornings, the repetitive drills, the endless practice sessions, the countless hours nobody applauded. Champions are not built on game day. Champions are built during ordinary days. Days when they didn't feel like training. Days when nobody was watching. Days when quitting would have been easier. The same principle applies to entrepreneurs. People see successful businesses and assume there was some secret formula. Usually, there wasn't. What existed was consistency, consistent effort, consistent learning, consistent problem solving, consistent execution. Year after year. Many businesses fail because people underestimate how long success actually takes. They expect immediate rewards, immediate recognition, immediate growth. And when those things don't arrive, they lose faith. But the entrepreneur who keeps showing up gains something powerful. Momentum. Momentum creates opportunities. Momentum creates confidence. Momentum creates results. The same applies to writers, artists, leaders, creators, experts. Every high achiever understands the same principle. Consistency wins, not occasionally, every time. Because success is rarely explosive. It's cumulative. That's why compound growth is one of the most important concepts you'll ever understand. Most people expect linear progress. They expect immediate evidence, immediate improvement, immediate returns. When those returns don't appear, they become discouraged. But progress often compounds invisibly. For a long time, it seems like nothing is happening. Then, suddenly, everything changes. Think about planting a seed. You don't see growth immediately. Days pass. Weeks pass. Sometimes it appears that nothing is happening. Yet beneath the surface, roots are forming. Strength is developing. Foundations are being built. Then, eventually, growth becomes visible. The same thing happens in your life. The same thing happens with discipline. The same thing happens with success. small actions. Massive outcomes, small actions. Massive outcomes, small actions. Massive outcomes. One workout seems small. One focused work session seems small. One book chapter seems small. One disciplined decision seems small. But repeated hundreds of times? Everything changes. A single drop of water seems insignificant. Yet over time, water can carve through stone. Consistency possesses that same power. That's why disciplined people stop obsessing over massive breakthroughs. They focus on daily execution, daily effort, daily progress. Because they understand something most people miss. Great lives are built through ordinary days repeated extraordinarily well. That's the key. The future is hidden inside your daily routine, not your intentions, not your dreams, not your plans, your routine. Now let's talk about long-term thinking, because consistency becomes easier when you stop measuring life in days and start measuring it in years. Most people sabotage themselves because they expect immediate rewards. They want immediate proof that their efforts are working, but life doesn't always operate on that timeline. Sometimes results take months, sometimes years, sometimes even longer. The disciplined person understands this. They stop asking, "Is it working yet?" and start asking, "Am I staying consistent?" That's a much more powerful question, because consistency is under your control. Outcomes are not always under your control. You cannot force success, but you can control your effort. You cannot guarantee results, but you can guarantee consistency. And consistency eventually influences results. You have a choice. Think short-term, or think long-term. One creates impatience, the other creates endurance. One focuses on immediate gratification, the other focuses on lasting achievement. The strongest people learn to play the long game. They understand that today's effort may not produce today's reward, but it still matters, because every action contributes to the future. Every action compounds. Every action matters. Now let's discuss one of the simplest and most powerful rules of discipline. Never miss twice. Never miss twice. Never miss twice. This rule can save you from years of frustration. Everyone slips. Everyone has bad days. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone misses a workout. Everyone has moments of weakness. That's normal. Perfection is not required. The danger begins when one mistake becomes a pattern. One missed workout becomes a missed week. One bad decision becomes a bad month. One setback becomes abandonment. That's where people lose momentum, not because they failed once, because they failed to recover. The disciplined person understands this. If they miss one day, they return the next. If they make one mistake, they correct it quickly. If they stumble, they get back up. Fast. Because consistency is not about perfection. It's about recovery. It's about returning. It's about refusing to allow temporary setbacks to become permanent habits. That's the difference. Never miss twice. Protect momentum. Protect consistency. Protect the habits that are building your future. You have a choice. Allow one mistake to define you, or let one mistake teach you. Allow one setback to stop you, or use it as fuel. The decision is always yours. Remember these principles. Motivation creates bursts. Discipline creates momentum. Small actions. Massive outcomes. Never miss twice. Master these lessons, and you'll stop chasing dramatic transformations. You'll start building unstoppable momentum. And once momentum is working in your favor, another dangerous habit must be eliminated. Because many people are not failing due to lack of effort. They're failing because they're waiting. Waiting for certainty. Waiting for confidence. waiting for the perfect moment. And that perfect moment never comes. Chapter 9. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. There is a dream killer hiding in plain sight. It doesn't look dangerous. It doesn't sound dangerous. In fact, it often disguises itself as wisdom, as preparation, as responsibility, as caution. But make no mistake, it has destroyed more opportunities than failure ever could. It's called waiting. Waiting for the perfect moment. Waiting for the perfect plan. Waiting for more confidence. Waiting for more knowledge. Waiting for more certainty. Waiting until everything feels right. And for many people, that moment never arrives. Years pass. Opportunities disappear. Potential fades. And the life they wanted remains permanently out of reach. Not because they couldn't achieve it, because they never started. That's the tragedy. Most dreams do not die because of failure. They die because of delay. The greatest threat to your future is often not action. It's hesitation. And hesitation usually comes from a hidden source. Fear. Perfectionism often hides fear. Perfectionism often hides fear. Perfectionism often hides fear. Many people believe perfectionism is a strength. It isn't. At least not in the way most people use it. What they call perfectionism is often fear wearing a disguise. Fear of failure. Fear of criticism. Fear of rejection. Fear of looking foolish. Fear of making mistakes. So instead of taking action, they continue preparing. Planning. Researching. Thinking. Waiting. Convincing themselves that they're being responsible. But deep down, they're avoiding risk. They're avoiding uncertainty. They're avoiding discomfort. That's the key. Perfectionism often has very little to do with excellence and everything to do with fear. Because excellence grows through action, perfectionism often prevents action. Think about how many people say, "I'll start when I know more. I'll start when I'm confident. I'll start when everything is ready." But confidence rarely comes before action. Confidence usually comes because of action. Knowledge grows through action. Skill develops through action. Clarity emerges through action. Waiting delays growth indefinitely. Because growth requires movement, and movement requires courage. You have a choice. Wait for certainty. Or create certainty through experience. One keeps you trapped. The other moves you forward. Start before you're ready. Start before you're ready. Start before you're ready. Those words have built more successful lives than almost any motivational quote ever created. Because nobody starts ready. Nobody. The entrepreneur isn't ready. The athlete isn't ready. The writer isn't ready. The leader isn't ready. The creator isn't ready. Readiness is not a prerequisite for action. Action is what creates readiness. Now let's look at reality. Every successful person you admire began imperfectly. Every single one. The successful entrepreneur launched an imperfect business. The successful author wrote an imperfect first draft. The successful athlete performed poorly at some point. The successful speaker once felt nervous. The successful leader once lacked experience. The difference wasn't talent. The difference wasn't confidence. The difference was willingness. Willingness to begin. Willingness to fail. Willingness to learn. Willingness to look imperfect. Most people only see the finished product. They don't see the awkward beginning. They don't see the mistakes. They don't see the uncertainty. They don't see the failures. But those failures existed. Those struggles existed. Those imperfect starts existed. Success is rarely born from perfection. Success is born from persistence. That's why waiting is so dangerous. Because every day you wait is a day you could have been learning. Every day you wait is a day you could have been improving. Every day you wait is a day you could have been building momentum. Instead, many people remain trapped in preparation mode, forever preparing, never executing, forever planning, never acting. And plans without action change nothing. You have a choice. Prepare forever, or begin imperfectly. One creates frustration. The other creates progress. Motion creates direction. Motion creates direction. Motion creates direction. Most people believe clarity comes first, but life rarely works that way. Clarity often comes after movement begins. Imagine driving through heavy fog. You cannot see 10 miles ahead. You can only see a short distance in front of you. But as you continue moving, more of the road becomes visible. Life works the same way. You don't need complete clarity. You need enough clarity to take the next step. The next step reveals the next step. And that step reveals another. Action creates information. Action creates feedback. Action creates experience. Experience creates wisdom. That's the process. But none of it happens while you're standing still. The person who starts gains information. The person who waits gains anxiety. That's the difference. Action reduces fear. Waiting often amplifies it. The longer you avoid something, the larger it becomes in your mind. The longer you delay, the heavier it feels. The longer you hesitate, the stronger fear becomes. But once you begin, reality often proves less frightening than imagination. That's why movement matters. That's why action matters. That's why momentum matters. Motion creates direction. Never forget that. Now let's discuss urgency. Because one of the greatest illusions in life is the belief that there will always be more time. People assume tomorrow will arrive. Next week will arrive. Next year will arrive. And often it does. But not always. Life is unpredictable. Circumstances change. Opportunities disappear. Health changes. Relationships change. Markets change. The future is never guaranteed. That's why urgency matters. Not panic. Not recklessness. Urgency. An awareness that time is valuable. An awareness that life is finite. An awareness that every day matters. Most people live as though they have unlimited tomorrows. That's a dangerous assumption, because eventually tomorrow runs out. And when that happens, the only thing remaining is regret. Regret for the risks not taken. Regret for the dreams postponed. Regret for the actions delayed. Regret for the life not fully lived. You have a choice. Use today, or waste it. Act now, or explain later why you didn't. That's the reality. The future rewards action, not intention, not desire, not wishes. Action. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. That truth is not meant to create fear. It's meant to create focus. Because once you realize time is limited, you begin treating it differently. You stop postponing important things. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop assuming opportunities will always be available. You begin moving. You begin acting. You begin living with urgency. That's the key. Urgency creates momentum. Urgency creates focus. Urgency creates discipline. Not because you're rushing, because you're respecting time. And time is your most valuable resource. Once spent, it cannot be recovered. Now means now. Now means now. Now means now. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Not eventually. Now. Send the message. Start the project. Make the decision. Take the step. Have the conversation. Begin the process. Whatever you've been postponing, start. Not because it's convenient, because it's necessary. The people who transform their lives are not always the smartest. They're not always the most talented. They're not always the most fortunate. They're often the people who stopped waiting. The people who acted despite uncertainty. The people who moved despite fear. The people who started before they felt ready. You have a choice. Continue waiting, or begin. Continue preparing, or execute. Continue dreaming, or build. The decision belongs to you. Remember these principles. Start before you're ready. Motion creates direction. Now means now. Master these lessons and you eliminate one of the most dangerous habits holding people back from greatness. Because when you stop waiting, you start moving. And once you're moving, there's one final lesson that ties everything together. A lesson about becoming stronger than every obstacle life places in your path. Because circumstances will never stop coming. Challenges will never stop coming. Difficulties will never stop coming. The question is whether you'll be strong enough to face them. Chapter 10. Become harder than your circumstances. Life does not ask for permission before it tests you. It doesn't check your schedule. It doesn't care how motivated you feel. It doesn't wait until you're ready. Challenges arrive without warning. Setbacks arrive without warning. Losses arrive without warning. One phone call can change everything. One mistake can change everything. One unexpected event can change everything. That's life. Unpredictable, uncertain, uncontrollable. And the sooner you accept that reality, the stronger you become. Because many people waste enormous amounts of energy trying to control things they cannot control. They try to control outcomes. They try to control circumstances. They try to control other people. They try to control the future. And when life refuses to cooperate, they fall apart. Not because life defeated them, because they built their confidence on things outside their control. That's the key. Your strength cannot depend on circumstances, because circumstances are always changing. The economy changes. Relationships change. Health changes. Opportunities change. Conditions change. Everything changes. The only thing that must remain stable is you. Life is unpredictable. Life is unpredictable. Life is unpredictable. Never forget that. The strongest people are not those who avoid difficult circumstances. The strongest people are those who remain strong despite difficult circumstances. They understand a powerful truth. You cannot always choose what happens, but you can always choose how you respond. And that response determines everything. Two people can face the exact same setback. One becomes bitter. One becomes stronger. One quits. One adapts. One blames. One learns. The event is identical. The response is different. And the response creates the outcome. Mental toughness determines response, not circumstances, not luck, not convenience. Response. That's why mental toughness is one of the most valuable skills you'll ever develop. Mental toughness is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite fear. Mental toughness is not the absence of difficulty. It is continuing despite difficulty. Mental toughness is not pretending pain doesn't exist. It is refusing to let pain dictate your future. You have a choice. Always. No matter what happens. Circumstances don't decide. Circumstances don't decide. Circumstances don't decide. Your response decides. Now let's talk about setbacks, because everyone experiences them. Everyone. There is no exception. The athlete gets injured. The entrepreneur loses money. The student fails an exam. The employee loses a job. The relationship ends. The opportunity disappears. The plan falls apart. These moments happen to everyone. The question is never whether setbacks will occur. The question is how you will handle them. Most people see setbacks as evidence they should stop. Resilient people see setbacks as evidence they need to adapt. That's a completely different mindset. A resilient person understands that failure is information. Failure provides feedback. Failure reveals weaknesses. Failure exposes gaps. Failure teaches lessons, and lessons create growth. That's why resilient people don't stay down for long. They feel disappointment. They feel frustration. They feel pain. But they keep moving, because they understand something most people forget. The journey is rarely a straight line. Progress is messy. Growth is messy. Success is messy. No great achievement was built without obstacles. No meaningful goal was achieved without setbacks. No extraordinary life was created without difficulty. That's reality. The entrepreneur whose company succeeds probably experienced failures first. The athlete who wins championships probably experienced losses first. The leader who inspires others probably experienced rejection first. The difference is not that they avoided setbacks. The difference is that they survived them. And survival requires resilience. Keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. Those 4 words can carry you through almost anything, not because they remove difficulty, because they prevent stagnation. As long as you're moving, you're learning. As long as you're moving, you're adapting. As long as you're moving, you're growing. The moment you stop, growth stops. The moment you quit, possibility disappears. That's why resilient people focus on movement, not perfection. Movement. Maybe progress is slow. Keep moving forward. Maybe conditions aren't ideal. Keep moving forward. Maybe confidence is low. Keep moving forward. Maybe the outcome is uncertain. Keep moving forward. Momentum matters, because momentum creates opportunity. And opportunity rarely finds people who have already quit. Now let's bring everything together. Because this entire audiobook has been leading to one conclusion. Discipline is not a skill. Discipline is a lifestyle. It is a way of thinking, a way of acting, a way of responding. It becomes part of who you are. Think about what you've learned. You stopped negotiating with yourself. You escaped the prison of comfort. You protected your attention from distraction. You eliminated excuses. You trained your mind to obey commands. You learned that pain is part of growth. You built a stronger identity. You embraced consistency. You stopped waiting for the perfect moment. Every lesson has pointed toward the same destination. Personal responsibility. Mental strength. Self-mastery. Because self-mastery changes everything. When you control your mind, distractions lose power. When you control your mind, excuses lose power. When you control your mind, fear loses power. When you control your mind, circumstances lose power. That's the transformation. Not becoming perfect. Becoming disciplined. The goal was never perfection. Perfection is impossible. The goal is reliability. The goal is becoming someone who can be counted on. Someone who follows through. Someone who keeps promises. Someone who acts despite discomfort. Someone who continues despite difficulty. Someone who becomes stronger instead of becoming bitter. That's the person you're building. And that person is capable of extraordinary things. Because discipline compounds, just like habits compound, just like effort compounds, just like focus compounds. The disciplined person gains advantages year after year, while others quit, while others complain, while others wait. The disciplined person continues, quietly, consistently, relentlessly. That's the power. Discipline eventually becomes automatic, not because life becomes easier, because you become stronger. You have a choice. You can spend your life hoping circumstances improve, or you can become the type of person who thrives regardless of circumstances. One path depends on luck. The other depends on discipline, and discipline is always available. No matter your age, no matter your background, no matter your current situation, the opportunity to become disciplined exists today. Right now. This moment. That's why this chapter matters. Because life will continue testing you. Life will continue challenging you. Life will continue surprising you. But if you've learned these lessons, you no longer need to fear those tests. Because you've built something stronger than favorable circumstances. You've built character. You've built resilience. You've built discipline. And discipline changes everything. Remember these principles. Circumstances don't decide. Keep moving forward. The disciplined mind cannot be defeated. The disciplined mind cannot be defeated. The disciplined mind cannot be defeated. Because even when it falls, it rises. Even when it struggles, it continues. Even when it suffers, it learns. Even when it loses, it adapts. That is true strength. That is mental toughness. That is self-mastery. And that is the foundation of an unstoppable life. Now that you've learned the principles, there's only one thing left. A final challenge. A final reminder. A final call to action. The closing message. You've heard the message. Now the question is whether you'll live it. Because discipline isn't information. Discipline is action. It's waking up when you don't feel like it. It's working when nobody is watching. It's staying committed when motivation disappears. It's choosing growth when comfort calls your name. Remember this. If you don't discipline your mind, life will. Life will discipline you through regret. Life will discipline you through missed opportunities. Life will discipline you through consequences you could have avoided. But you don't have to wait for pain to become your teacher. You can become your own teacher. You can become your own leader. You can become the person who does what must be done, regardless of mood, circumstance, or difficulty. Starting today, stop negotiating. Stop waiting. Stop explaining. Stop delaying. Make a decision. Choose one difficult thing you've been avoiding. Do it today. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today. Because every action trains your mind, and the disciplined mind creates an unstoppable life.